So thanks everybody for coming to lecture number 20. There's only a few left, but we're quite privileged and happy to have for his first lecture, although he came over to a convention years ago, my good friend Dana Larsen over here. And I'll spare you my interpretation of his work, which is a bit longer than my own in this field. So it's been great to have him come over and see him develop some new ideas and adventures as well. And it's refreshing to see what he's up to all the time. And so today's topic is pot and politics, and Dana has extensive experience in this field. And so we're really looking forward to hearing some of his history and thoughts on that area. And yeah, I guess best of luck with your new dispensary as well.
Thanks, Ted. And it's wonderful to be here. So my name is Dana Larsen, and I've been a marijuana and drug reform advocate for pretty much all of my adult life. And over the years, I've been editor of Cannabis Culture magazine, which I worked on with Mark Emery for about 10 years. I helped found the Vancouver Seed Bank on East Hastings Street, and more recently, just next door, we've opened up a medical cannabis dispensary. And also I've been a member of the New Democratic Party for the last few years, and I had a short-lived effort as a candidate in the last election, which I might touch on in a little bit. But I'm here to talk about pot and politics, and I'm going to assume that our audience is people who understand that we need to find an end to the war on marijuana, and that we're all agreed that marijuana is a great plant, perhaps the world's best plant, and that we want, as an activist movement, to change the law in this country and end the prohibition on marijuana, and hopefully on the rest of the sacred plants as well, and the whole drug war and prohibition, as we call it. And so over the years, I've seen a lot of different people trying different ways in order to achieve this ultimate goal. You know, we've gone from rallies in the streets or at the Art Gallery in Vancouver or at other locations, and public smoke-ins, and the creations of magazines, and breaking the law openly through selling bongs and pipes and marijuana seeds, and all this kind of infrastructure and development of our culture, and creating public awareness of what the marijuana plant is and why it's important and why it's beneficial. And that's all been laying a lot of groundwork, but to me it seems that our ultimate goal is to get rid of a bad law. Everything we're doing ultimately is about trying to end this prohibition and change an unjust law, and that is something that happens through our parliamentary system, where our elected representatives hopefully vote and create and write a new law or get rid of the old one in some way. And so over the years, it's been very frustrating for me as we get change, as we let people know about this stuff, and it's still the law gets worse. Anytime they've changed the law in Canada, that our parliament has changed the law in Canada, it's been a change for the worse. The last time we had a new drug law written in our country was in 1996, and despite endless testimony from virtually every group that wanted to oppose prohibition or spoke out against this law in some way, the Liberal government at the time, regardless, passed our new prohibitionist drug laws, which included a lot of new penalties and things which are still being felt and increased to this day. And it seems like our politicians will ignore the evidence about marijuana and about the drug war. And it seems like this is an issue that's kind of the third rail of politics, that no one wants to talk about it. And even those who do seem to understand or want to talk about it won't really come out and say it openly. They'll only do it in kind of a half-assed, mealy-mouthed sort of way. And I think we've all experienced that frustration of knowing that we're right, having scientific evidence on our side, having public opinion on our side, and yet still struggling to change these laws and this top-down system that is not allowing us somehow to make this change happen. And I helped create the BC Marijuana Party and the Canadian Marijuana Party around the year 1999 and 2000. And we ran candidates in British Columbia, we ran candidates all across the province, and federally we ran quite a few candidates across the country. And that was a really interesting experience for me and for a lot of other people as their first real involvement in the political process, and being up there with other candidates and with the person who would ultimately become the Member of Parliament or the Member of the Legislative Assembly here. And sort of being introduced to how this works and what our system is and how it's structured. And if we had a different kind of electoral system where we had proportional representation, then perhaps the Marijuana Party would be able to elect some people Or perhaps we wouldn't need to have a specific marijuana party because it would be easier for us to work with other small parties like the Green Party that have also now adapted a very strong anti-prohibitionist stance. But in our political system, we have the first past the post system, which makes it very difficult for smaller parties to ever actually get elected into parliament. And so as a smaller party, ultimately what you can do is hector the other parties. You can use your platform as a political party to spread awareness, and during election campaigns you have an excuse to get out there and pamphlet everybody and knock on doors and talk to people as part of the electoral process. And this is, I guess, the crux of what I think our activist movement should be moving towards in many ways, is that it's important to get involved within the mainstream political parties. And I believe that this is a very powerful fulcrum of change, a place where we can leverage the numbers in our movement to have a greater effect than the people that are actually there. We can make small numbers of people can have a profound influence within a political party. And so I'm within the NDP, and I switched over to the NDP because Jack Layton came on Pot TV and also on Much Music and talked about how he wanted his party to move beyond decriminalization policy, which is a policy they've had as something they enacted in 1999, I think it was. And Jack spoke openly about needing to create better drug laws and to reform our country's drug laws and to go beyond decriminalization. And although that's been NDP policy for a while, he was the first party leader to really come out and talk about this openly and to make it seem like he was going to make it a priority for the party. And so a number of us within the marijuana party decided to switch over. And we actually had a big debate within the marijuana party at the time as to what our future was going to be. And the leader of the marijuana party, the Canadian marijuana party, was a fellow named Boris St. Maurice, who's from Montreal. And he had created the Bloc Pot in Montreal, or in Quebec, which was Canada's first marijuana-focused political party. And then when he wanted to create the Canadian Marijuana Party, he traveled across the country meeting with activists in each province and got us all involved in this. And it's interesting because at the time he argued that if we're going to leave the marijuana party, we should join the Liberals. They're the natural governing party of Canada. They're the ones that typically hold power most of the time. If we're going to convert a party to our cause, it should be them, and not the NDP, who have never formed government, and who cares what they think anyways federally. And although Boris struggled to keep the marijuana party together, enough of us defected to the NDP, and he ended up joining the Liberals a few years later. And there still is a Canadian marijuana party federally, but it's not nearly what it used to be, and it's really a diminished organization. But although it's been a big struggle working within the NDP and within the mainstream parties, I think it is something that is going to pay off. And although it's something that seems slow and frustrating sometimes, over the last few years, I believe that not just myself, but the group of people that have come into the NDP have had a tremendous influence within the party, and something that is going to be felt more and more as time goes on. And the NDP is kind of unique compared to the other parties in Canada because it's the only party which is united provincially and federally into one unified organization. So in BC, the BC Liberal Party and the Federal Liberal Party have nothing in common. They may have overlapping members in some way, but structurally and organizationally and philosophically, they are entirely different parties. But the NDP is one group. When you join the NDP provincially or federally, you become part of it in both ways. And although that can be a challenge sometimes, if you don't like your provincial government or your provincial NDP, it can, work against the federal party. As an activist within the NDP, it gives me a lot of power to go to other provincial conventions where we're all still brothers and sisters in the NDP, and to be able to bring these ideas forward in different provinces at the provincial level. And sometimes people will say, well, if the marijuana laws and the drug laws are all federal, who cares what the provincial governments or municipal governments say? But I don't see it like that at all. And we see that every level of government is involved in pushing the drug war and in creating prohibition or in dealing with the issues behind it. We've seen numerous municipalities around our city